In the summer of 1942, British officers gathered in the Egyptian desert to witness a demonstration of a promising new American weapon. The United States had shipped over a small number of early M1 bazookas, eager for feedback from an ally already deep in mechanized warfare. A captured German Panzer III was rolled into position. The bazooka team took aim. The rocket launched cleanly, struck its target, and burned through the armor exactly as advertised. By every technical measure, the test was a success. And yet, the British response was brief, polite, and definitive. No, thank you. This decision has often been misunderstood. It is sometimes portrayed as arrogance, conservatism, or bureaucratic stubbornness. In reality, it was none of those things. The British Army did not reject the bazooka because it failed. They rejected it because they already had something else, something heavier, uglier, more physically demanding, and in many ways far more dangerous to use. A weapon that American engineers would have dismissed outright. A weapon soldiers frequently hated. A weapon that, in the places Britain expected to fight, worked better. That weapon was the PIAT. The infantry's impossible problem. By 1941, infantry forces across Europe faced a brutal reality. Tanks had evolved faster than the weapons meant to stop them. Early war anti-tank rifles, once considered cutting-edge, were already obsolete. The British Boys anti-tank rifle, firing a massive .55 caliber round, could penetrate roughly 21 millimeters of armor at 300 yards under ideal conditions. That might have been sufficient in the late 1930s. It was hopeless by the time German Panzer III and IV models appeared with 30 to 50 millimeters of armor, often sloped to further deflect incoming fire. Anti-tank guns could still kill tanks, but they came with their own limitations. They were heavy, slow to deploy, and dependent on vehicles or crews that were often targeted first. In fluid, close-range fighting, they were frequently bypassed or destroyed before they could influence the battle. Infantry needed something radically different. They needed a weapon that a single soldier could carry. A weapon that could ambush armor. A weapon that could kill a tank before the tank could kill them. This need drove experimentation across every major army in the war. The physics that changed everything. The breakthrough came not from ballistics, but from explosives. Physicists had known for decades that a shaped explosive charge could focus energy in a way conventional explosives could not. When detonated, a hollow cone lined with metal, usually copper, collapses inward, forming a jet traveling at hypersonic speed. This jet does not behave like a bullet. It does not rely on velocity in the traditional sense. Instead, it cuts through armor using extreme pressure and heat, punching far beyond what its size would suggest. This phenomenon, often called the Monroe effect, offered infantry a theoretical solution to armored dominance. The challenge was no longer how to penetrate armor. It was how to deliver the charge. 3 nations, 3 answers. Different armies reached different conclusions. The Americans chose rockets. So did the Germans. The British chose something else entirely. Lieutenant Colonel Stuart Blacker was an unlikely figure in weapons development. A veteran of the Indian Army and an early aviation enthusiast, Blacker spent years experimenting with unconventional designs. He was fascinated by simplicity and mechanical efficiency, often rejecting traditional assumptions outright. In 1930, he patented a design that seemed backwards even by experimental standards. Instead of firing a projectile down a barrel, Blacker's weapon used a solid steel rod, a spigot. The bomb sat over this rod, its hollow tail containing a small propellant charge. When fired, the rod struck the charge, igniting it. The explosion propelled the bomb forward while simultaneously driving the rod backward into the weapon. There was no barrel, no expanding gas chamber, and critically, no backblast. At the time, the military showed little interest. That changed after Dunkirk. Desperation opens doors. Britain's evacuation from France in 1940 stripped the army of enormous quantities of equipment. The Home Guard, hastily formed and lightly armed, needed something, anything, capable of stopping armored vehicles if Germany invaded. Blacker demonstrated his first practical weapon, the Blacker Bombard, to Winston Churchill himself. It was a massive, fixed weapon firing a 20-pound anti-tank bomb. Crude and awkward, but devastating at close range. Churchill approved it immediately. More than 22,000 were produced. But Blacker wasn't finished. He believed the same principle could be adapted into a shoulder-fired weapon. A near-fatal rejection. In June 1941, Blacker presented his shoulder-fired prototype to the War Office. The demonstration was a disaster. The casing flexed. The spigot jammed. Some bombs failed to detonate on impact. The Ordnance Board's verdict was scathing. They concluded the weapon would be ineffective as an anti-tank system under any conceivable battlefield conditions. Blacker was reassigned. Most inventions die here. This one did not. MD-1 and the toy shop. Major Millis Jeffress, working at MD-1, Churchill's secret weapons laboratory, saw potential where others saw failure. Known informally as the toy shop, MD-1 existed to produce unconventional weapons without bureaucratic interference. Jeffress combined Blacker's spigot principle with new hollow charge technology already developed for the infamous No. 74 sticky bomb. The result was a weapon that finally worked. By early 1942, the new design was outperforming expectations. Production was approved in August, a full month before American bazookas even arrived in British hands for evaluation. The weapon was officially named the PIAT, Projector, Infantry, Anti-Tank. A brutal tool. The PIAT weighed approximately 32 pounds. It measured just under 40 inches. It fired a bomb 3.5 inches in diameter. Its effective range was limited, roughly 100 yards against stationary targets, less against moving ones. Many soldiers claimed that 50 yards was the realistic limit in combat. But within that range, it was lethal. Armor penetration reached up to 100 millimeters, enough to destroy any German tank from the side or rear during most of the war. Its greatest flaw was also its most infamous feature. To cock the PIAT, the operator had to place the weapon upright, step on the shoulder pad, unlock the spring with a quarter turn, and haul upward using their entire body weight. The force required approached 200 pounds. Some soldiers simply could not do it. Training manuals acknowledged that recocking while prone was possible, but only with practice, strength, and determination. Complaints were constant. And yet, the weapon stayed. The bazooka alternative. The American M1 bazooka took a very different approach. At just 18 pounds, it was light, intuitive, and relatively easy to operate. A two-man team could fire and reload quickly. Its 2.36-inch rocket achieved similar penetration to the PIAT, with a slightly longer effective range. But the rocket came with consequences. Ignition produced a violent backblast extending more than 15 meters behind the operator. Anyone standing there risked severe injury or death. The firing signature was unmistakable: smoke, flame, dust, and a loud, distinctive roar. In enclosed spaces, firing was often fatal. British doctrine emphasized urban fighting, defensive ambushes, and concealed positions. In those environments, backblast wasn't an inconvenience. It was a death sentence. Silent violence. The PIAT had no backblast. It could be fired from inside buildings, from trenches, from rubble, from cellars and stairwells. British infantry schools continued PIAT instruction until 1959, explicitly noting its ability to be fired indoors. More than 200 PIATs were airdropped to resistance groups in occupied Europe for this exact reason. At Arnhem, British paratrooper reports consistently noted how difficult PIAT teams were to locate in built-up areas. The weapon produced a dull thump, not a scream. You fired. You moved. And you lived. Combat reality. The PIAT first saw combat in Tunisia in early 1943. Canadian units employed it extensively during the Sicily landings later that year. Early reports highlighted problems: misfires, unreliable fuses, and failures to detonate unless impact angles were favorable. These issues were gradually corrected. By 1944, the PIAT had earned something far more valuable than official approval: trust. A Canadian Army survey of 161 officers returning from combat ranked the PIAT as the most effective infantry weapon in service, above even the Bren gun. During the initial Overlord period, British analysis credited PIAT teams with destroying 7% of all German tanks knocked out by British forces. That figure exceeded the kill rate of RAF Typhoons firing rockets. A shoulder-fired weapon had outperformed aircraft. Courage at point-blank range. The PIAT's limitations meant its successes were often acts of extreme bravery. At Monte Cassino in May 1944, Fusilier Francis Jefferson seized a PIAT after its crew was killed. He advanced under fire and destroyed a German tank at close range. At Arnhem, Major Robert Kane spent 6 days engaging armored vehicles with PIATs under constant fire. When a bomb detonated prematurely, he was temporarily blinded. He refused evacuation and continued fighting with both eardrums ruptured. Private Ernest "Smoky" Smith earned his Victoria Cross in Italy after destroying a Panther at 30 feet, then repelling a German infantry assault with a submachine gun while protecting a wounded comrade. 6 Victoria Crosses were awarded for actions involving the PIAT, more than any other infantry anti-tank weapon of the war. The cost of a miss. Not everyone loved the PIAT. Sergeant Waggoner Thornton famously described it as a load of rubbish, noting its short range and brutal recoil. His warning was simple. You must not miss. Reloading was slow. Cocking was exhausting. And if the tank survived your shot, it knew exactly where you were. Many did not get a second chance. Bazooka troubles. The bazooka's early combat record was far less impressive. During Operation Torch, American units struggled with rushed training and unreliable ammunition. An inspecting general later reported he could not find a single confirmed instance of a bazooka stopping a tank. By mid-1943, further distribution of the M1 was suspended due to ignition failures and defective rockets. Humidity corroded battery contacts. Cold weather caused incomplete propellant burn. Backblast exposed operators instantly. General Patton himself described the bazooka as a last resort weapon, recommending engagement ranges of no more than 30 yards. At that distance, survival was unlikely regardless of accuracy. Heavier armor, same limits. Both weapons struggled against later German tanks. Side skirts, originally designed to counter anti-tank rifles, often disrupted shaped charges by detonating them prematurely. Neither the bazooka nor the PIAT could penetrate Tiger frontal armor. Flanking shots were mandatory. And flanking shots were deadly. Legacy and obsolescence. The Germans learned quickly. Captured bazookas led directly to the Panzerfaust and Panzerschreck, larger, more powerful weapons with dramatically increased penetration. Post-war development followed the rocket path. The Soviet RPG-2 and RPG-7. The M72 Law. The AT-4. Modern guided missiles. The PIAT had no descendants. It was heavy, short-ranged, physically punishing. It survived into Korea, then quietly disappeared. Why Britain said no? Britain's decision was not emotional. It was practical. Production was already underway. Doctrine favored concealed, close combat. Urban fighting demanded zero backblast. The numbers supported the choice. Over 115,000 PIATs produced. 7% of tank kills. 6 Victoria Crosses. One of the most effective infantry weapons of the war. The bazooka won history. The PIAT won battles. And when British commanders in Egypt watched that bazooka rocket punch cleanly through German armor in 1942, they didn't see a bad weapon. They saw one that didn't fit the war they were fighting.